Hello.
Are you taping this?
Oh,
Are you taping this?
started taping it, Dutch. This has been one giant fanny around for half an hour. Us trying to get our. It's not Dutch's fault, I assure you, everybody. Anyway, we're starting recording now. That was the intro, and this is this intro. Hello, everybody. It's James here. Storytime with Dutch Mantell, episode 42. We have stuff to plug. I'll get through them very quickly. Dwayne The Rock Johnson, by yours truly. A lovely biography that I wrote. Owen Hart, King of Pranks, that I also wrote. Fantastic book. Dutch has got two books, The World According to Dutch and Tales from a Dirt Road. All four can be bought from Amazon. If you want signed copies of Dutch's books, go to Dirty Dutchman Tell with two L's at gmail.com, and you can sort out a price with the Dutchman himself, which will depend on delivery and all that from where you live. And also, I'd like to mention, look at that.
Great. Great. That is a classic. You people mean nothing to me. And I don't know where that little exclamation sideways came from. It was just there, and I kept it.
Where did you get it from? Did you just have it printed at just whatever T-shirt place you could find, or?
Yeah, just hell. Somebody said I know a guy, and okay, and he came in sideways, kind of, and I tried to take it somewhere else. They said, "Well, we can't do that." I said, "Why not?" Well, there's no mark on the keyboard for that. I said, "Well, do the best you can with it, I guess." I don't know.
If you want a copy of a T-shirt, for God's sake, if you want a T-shirt, the links are under this video, under every video, in the descriptions of every podcast. You cannot miss it. It's at Teespring. Anyway, there you go. T-shirts there, and give us 5 stars on iTunes. That's got to be the most shambolic intro, Dutch. Oh, it's tragic. Anyway, the point was that we were supposed to be starting on StreamYard, and then for some reason, Dutch's microphone wouldn't raise to a regular level.
Oh. Blame Dutch.
I'm not blaming you.
I'm used to it. I get blamed for everything.
Well, do you remember a few episodes ago when my microphone was dead low?
But hey, did I blame you? No.
No.
I blamed it on technology.
Yeah.
That's what I blamed it on.
What was that thing you tweeted out yesterday? Something about an iPad.
No, I read one time where paper will be useless in the future because technology is going to take care of that. And I thought that whoever wrote that stupid comment has never tried to wipe their ass with an iPad. And it got over pretty good. But I guess the likes or whatever, that still confuses me. But I can put some stuff up and it'll be viewed like 75,000 times. And it gets a fair amount of comments. But I think my Twitter, has your Twitter changed?
No, my Twitter is just as uninteracted with as it ever was.
Well, I don't get a lot of things I used to get. Now I get a lot of just fighting on the streets and fighting in school and fighting on a bus or on the plow, whatever.
You're on Instagram, aren't you, Dutch, right? So
I am on Instagram. Yeah. Hey, I am so lost on social media. I'm just lost. And if you tell me something, when say we're complaining now, and I am complaining about the mic and all. See, when you're trying to explain that to me, it's like you're speaking Greek to me because I don't understand. Because I never took a course in it. Because when I was in high school, that was when we were still using hieroglyphics. So computer talk was just. I don't know what you're talking about.
When I went to school, we were only just starting to get introduced computers, but as like part of the syllabus. So you'd have them as part of the classroom. And
syllabus,
yeah,
syllabus. Good word.
I know. I thought about that before, and I thought Dutch would like that word.
That's a good word. Yeah. Syllabus.
But the thing is, like kids these days. I mean, I remember one of my little cousins when they were 2. They could operate the dad's iPhone at 2. They could call people on it. Yeah. They couldn't read, but they could see the little pictures of the person they were calling and hand it back. Amazing.
And if you put a phone in front of them, a lot of people won't even remember this, but it's the rotary phone they called, where you have to dial it. They wouldn't know what to do. They'd look at it like, what the hell is this? Crazy.
Do you still have phone boxes there? Because, I mean, phone box use here has never changed because people always use them to have a piss in.
Well, when I went to the UK, and the phone boxes are red, right?
Yeah, the traditional ones are, yeah.
Well, I love that because you can step inside of them and kind of cut yourself off from the street. But we don't really have those anymore. Because you used to go in the airport, they would have a whole bank of phones on the wall, and I mean they'd be 10 or 12 of them, and they'd all be full. But since of course we got our iPhones now, nobody uses that anymore. I don't know how long it's been since I've seen you drop a quarter in phone, and this is what these were. I haven't seen them in a long time. James, you're frozen on me.
Oh, for God's sake. Let me just pause. I'm unfrozen now. So, before I freeze up again, we're going to talk some news, then we're going to talk about the trouble with TNA. So we're going to talk some TNA stories, which I know always makes Dutch roll his eyes and just like some sort of traumatic event in his past. But unfortunately, we're going to have to go back to it. But for now, we're going to be talking about some news. Ric Flair, always a favourite of our news stories, his foul-mouthed rant on critics of his last match after winning, in quotation marks, Wrestling Observer Newsletter's most disgusting promotional tactic of 2022. Here is the quote he said, and I'm going to clean it up a little bit. "You know what I got to say to that? I made $300,000. Go F yourselves." This is to the voters, apparently. "That's right. I made $300,000 disgusting you. Disgust yourself for $300,000 and get in the shape that I got. How about that, mother effers?"
Get in the shape he got. Damn, I would just take a fifth of liquor to get in the shape he was in. Is he talking about physical shape? He looked like hell. He looked like, and we've talked about this before. I thought he was going to die. I thought the guy was going to die in the ring. And as far as making $300,000, I don't think he made that. What did the promoter make? Did he promote it himself, or did
this was the Conrad Thompson thing?
Conrad,
yeah.
But I'm sure that was a 50-50 deal, I guess. I'm sure, because you're not going to do it for nothing. And yeah, they drew a great house in the Nashville Civic Coliseum. It holds about 7,000 people. It's an old arena, but still a functioning arena. It still works. But I don't know if he made $300,000. But if he did, so what? I don't know.
Yeah,
I was disappointed, and he ripped the fans off. And even he planned, and I've said this before, the layout of the match was wrong. Why didn't they let his son-in-law do the sell part and Rick make the comeback instead of him going in there and trying to sell and then winning the match? And he was sweating like a Russian racehorse. And I've had people write me and said, I thought he was going to, seriously, people thought he was going to die. And I think he passed out a time or two in there. Doesn't even remember it. He doesn't even remember it. So Ric Flair now is trying to leave a legacy, and he should have left it alone or changed a lot of things in that match, because his legacy now is tarnished. I don't know. Ric Flair's full of shit. It always has been.
With Rick, I'll mention a couple of things here. Is one, he's all of a sudden turned into the thinnest skinned wrestler in the world. It's like no one can criticize him for anything, even when it's glaringly obvious. Like he's fallen out with... In fact, there was a video I put out there with Shane Douglas where he had to specifically address it, even though for the most part Shane was being very nice about him. But then he just buries Shane for, how dare he go out into the real world and get a job, manage, and a good job as well. But, he's got it in for Shane, and Shane has got it in for Rick. And the other thing is, as you picked up on there, Ric Flair's shape. I got into the shape I was in. My dad is 5 years older, and I swear he can run. He can still run. He's 78. He can climb. He's in good shape. Ric Flair was like, as you said, like, just, what awful. I can't even finish a sentence about how bad of a shape he turned up in. And also, do you think he went in there knowing that he was going to rip the fans off performance-wise?
No, I don't think he went in there knowing that. I don't think he thinks that far ahead. I think he thinks immediate future, and let's go do this match and let's get out of it. And I don't know. It was just an awful performance. They say never meet your heroes because it's going to be disappointed. You'll be disappointed. But a lot of them got exposed to Rick. And I think if they had another match that he said, this is my last one, I don't think he'd do a fourth as good as this one would do. Unless they just had one hell of an undercard. And people want to see that instead of seeing Flair. What would have really been bad if him and Steamboat had done it?
Ooh, singles match.
Can you imagine Rick trying to pull the whole load? He couldn't have gone 5 minutes. And they said he was drunk when he went in there. To me, that's totally, totally disrespectful to the people that made him, to the fans that made Ric Flair, for him to go in there and disrespect them. And as for his comment, F you, to all the people who knocked the match or whatever he was mad about, the fans should be saying it to him. Screw you, Flair. And the tickets weren't cheap for that match either. I don't know what the ringside was. I think it's like $50 or $100. That's a pretty expensive ticket for just a big independent show. Even Ric Flair was on it. But I would never, ever say F you to the fans who knocked me for a legitimate reason. At least I have sense enough to know that I can't go in the ring and have a match. You couldn't melt and pour me into a ring. I mean, you just could melt me and put me in a cup and just pour me into the ring, because I would refuse to do it. And one thing is, I know I have a bad knee now and a limp and everything else. But even if I didn't have that, I couldn't go in there and do it because I would blow up. And blow up means run out of steam, run out of air. And Rick was blowed about 30 seconds in. You could see him already sucking wind. And he's already had a heart attack. That's why people thought that he was going to die. I'm glad he didn't. I'm pretty sure that he's glad he didn't too. But it was really a slap in the fan's face to pay all that money to see him in that condition that he was in. Plus, he got drunk and I don't know what. He said he was sick, and he made all kind of excuses. Rick, you're just too old to do it. And you can't, damn sure. He may have done it before when he was halfway drunk, I guess. I mean, I don't think I could do it, even back when I was starting out. If I got hammered to go into to a ring, I couldn't perform. It would just be, I don't know, it'd be a mess. But not the mess that Ric Flair ended up with.
Yeah, I mean, he went in, he knew he was injured, he probably may have been able to do something several months beforehand, but he knew before the match he was injured, and then he got drunk as well. So, I mean, there you go. We will move on. And a couple more awards from the Wrestling Observer. I know this is like really late news, just as we were going to do this last week, and then we had yet more issues with video and stuff like that, so we sort of just skipped it. But I'll mention a couple of other things. AEW won Promotion of the Year with the Wrestling Observer Newsletter Awards, and Tony Khan won Booker of the Year. And does Tony and AEW deserve these accolades, or do you think it should go to WWE or someone else?
Who voted on this? The fans?
The subscribers
of his newsletter.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, I don't know if they deserve them or not, really, to tell you the truth, because I didn't vote in that. And it's not up to me. It's up to the fans. But I think Tony Khan being Booker of the Year. See, the term Booker is misused nowadays. Tony is not really, he's booking, but I don't know if you can book 2 or 3 shows and You can put names down, but I mean, I can't follow AEW programming, and I don't even watch Dynamite. I watch Rampage. Sometimes it's good. Sometimes it's just matches thrown out there. The matches aren't bad, but sometimes they're overly produced, and that sometimes this guy he's getting ready to throw a clothesline, but he does a forward row and then throws a clothesline. I don't know how that helps the execution of the clothesline. I just don't know.
I think Conan invented that. He used to do that in WCW in the 90s. He used to do, he was 4 minutes into a match, he was blown up after 30 seconds, and then right at the end, he'd roll forward and then do the clothesline, which actually I quite liked.
Well, it is what it is. So, did Tony Khan deserve it? Well, I guess he deserved it as much as anybody in WWE deserved it, I guess. Because WWE has a creative team. They don't really have a booker. They do creative team, and I don't know how something is decided on. I guess Triple H finally takes the choices they have arrived upon and decides from there. And I've never liked committee booking, because if something goes wrong, well, you got a bunch of other people you can blame it on. But the ultimate responsibility comes down to Triple H. But I think WWE, they need to get it, I think, because of the turnaround that SmackDown and Raw did. I mean, if you watch SmackDown 8 months ago, you say, my God, this is terrible. They still had great production. They had great lighting. They had, the great sound, great music. But the matches didn't mean anything. But he turned it around. And I think, who got best promotion? AEW?
AEW.
Well,
WWE got third behind Stardom, which is a Japanese women's wrestling promotion. Which not that many people watch over here, but a lot of people voted.
Yeah, well, that's because Meltzer, he knows more than anybody else. Meltzer, he got pissed at me one time, and I may have brought this up before, but he blocked me on Twitter. Oh, I'm mad. I'm not going to talk to you anymore, dude. He's full of crap, and he's never liked me anyway. But anyway, that's neither here nor there. So he can kiss my hiney.
We're getting really clean language on this episode already.
We are, because people judge you by the way you talk. A lot of people tune into Cornette because nothing is sacred to him. Nothing. And he's kind of funny when he's delivering it, but I try not to talk that way. I do, but I don't. It's according to what I'm doing at the time. But anyway, Meltzer, he can kiss my ass. I've said that before too.
Just because you mentioned it, Tony Khan's booking 3 shows, as you said, Dynamite, Rampage, and Ring of Honor. And I found out, or I think it was made public very recently, have a guess how many people can legally access Ring of Honor television. So how many people are subscribed to Ring of Honor's over-the-top streaming service?
Okay, where is it? It's on streaming?
Yeah, it's on Ring of Honor's own streaming service. Have a guess how many subscribers they have.
1,000 people.
A tiny bit more, 12,000. So they're paying how many wrestlers to be exclusive? Cesaro, not exclusive, but Cesaro's the champion. Eddie Kingston's moving to Ring of Honor. Loads of others.
So to subscribe to this streaming service, how much is it?
I don't know, probably $10 a month.
Okay. Ring of Honor, I don't know. Yeah, why would you bother? That's $120,000 a month, and he's paying that out for, according to what these contracts are. How many people does AEW have under contract?
We established this in a couple of episodes ago, 161.
But I'm sure some of those are on a pay per event basis.
I think these are all people who have contracts, and then they get people in for one shots as well.
I don't know.
We'll leave that there.
There's an old saying in wrestling. You know how you make $1 million in wrestling?
Start with 2 million.
I've told you.
Yeah.
Start with 2 million. That's an old that goes back to when I first started. An old timer told me, you know how you make $1 million? Well, start with 2 million. And I didn't get it then. And he looked at me like, you lose money. Fine, he just give up on it. But it is true.
I'll give you a couple more, then we'll move off the Wrestling Observer thing. Worst gimmick, obviously Maximum Male Models. You called that straight away. Most overrated wrestler, Ronda Rousey. You probably called that as well, because Ronda's just not been sort of portrayed how she was during the first one. But this one was a bit... Oh, God. Dutch has disappeared. One sec. Sorry about that. Dutch disappeared then for a second. I'll re-answer it. Right. Worst gimmick was Maximum Male Models. You called it. Most overrated wrestler, Ronda Rousey, quite possibly. But this one was interesting. Worst television announcer, Corey Graves. What do you think of that?
I agree with it. I think he's as bland as they come. He says nothing memorable, doesn't add to anything. The guy's been there for 30 years. I don't know. Somebody must like him somewhere. But I've never really been impressed. Nice guy, but I've never been impressed by his announcing. See, I miss guys like Heenan. I miss guys like Lawler. I miss guys like Cornette. That really add color to it. Who's the guy doing color on SmackDown? What's his name? The British guy.
Oh, not Nigel. Wade Barrett. Is it Wade Barrett?
Wade Barrett. He's okay, but he still doesn't really add that much to it. Because what you got now out there, you got, Michael Cole, Wade Barrett, that are both straight guys. And you need some of that color in there to make it, to be able to listen to it. I mean, they're just giving you straight commentary, which give me some bull crap. Give me something. I mean, just to say hey, did you hear what he said? And that makes you listen to them. Lawler, you would listen to Lawler because you didn't know what he was going to say. And you would listen to Cornette because you don't know what he's going to say. And Heenan, he was the best. But Corey Graves, I agree with that. Who was the best announcer? Is that what he says?
Kevin Kelly.
Yeah, but where is he now?
He's doing the English version of New Japan.
Oh, okay. Well, you see, you're dealing with a different type of fan that take Meltzer's or read Meltzer's stuff. He doesn't put the sheet out anymore, I'm sure, but it's all on the internet. But it's a different fan. So, but for him to still claim that represents the majority of the wrestling fans, that's not true. Because a lot of people never heard of a lot of these like Stardom. How many regular wrestling fans you think know of Stardom? Not many.
Western, very few, I imagine.
And Meltzer, he must spend half his time in Japan because he loves it so much. Like he would give those matches over there 6 stars, 7 stars. I mean, just to tell you how good it is. But if you take the same match and put it in the U.S., the people would sit there and probably do nothing because you got to follow a story. I mean, in any country or in any language. And if you don't know the story, you're just going to sit there. Yeah, the moves are great. But is it wrestling or is it a tumbling exhibition? Or is it gymnastics? I don't know. And it's hard to tell. With the story, you can kind of piece it together. But without that, you don't know what they're doing or what it means.
I believe Kevin Kelly actually watches this. So hello, Kevin, if you're watching, by the way. I'm going to move on news stories. We're going to get off Wrestling Observer. And we're going to go to Vince McMahon physically returning to a WWE show for the first time, I think, at this past Raw. And he also turned up with a mustache, apparently. But that was like the big story. But there's no photos of it, so we can't comment on it. And who better to comment on a mustache than you, of course?
Well, I saw a photo of him with a little mustache.
He was doctored.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. I know exactly the photo as well, but it was doctored, that one. He reportedly sat at Gorilla all night, but wasn't barking orders like he used to do at Triple H, who was in charge. But apparently there were more Vinceisms that are sneaking back into WWE, like calling Chad Gable short and ugly. Assuming Michael Cole is saying this of all people, that would be quite amusing. And Johnny Gargano is a comic book reading nerd. So they're sort of going back towards making fun of whoever's shorter on the roster for some reason. So have you noticed the last month or two some slight Vince McMahon touches on creative, maybe?
Well, just from what I've heard, but I still have my doubts of whether Vince is going to ease his way back in there like he was before. I think he's just they're letting him do this now. Why he sits in on at the gorilla position and mans the headset, because that's where he used to sit. You go up there to the gorilla, you're getting ready to go on. There was Vince sitting right up next to the wall behind with earphones on, and he's directing the whole show. And I've heard a lot of those announcers get, literally cussed out. And then somebody could come back from the ring. If he didn't like the match, he'd get up and, blast them in front of everybody. That's why Vince didn't rule with finesse. He ruled with, with power. Because he'd get up and he just blast you verbally in front of everybody. He'd embarrass the guy. And actually, he would embarrass the people just listening to him. Because whatever the guy did, is it worth getting up and making an ass out of yourself and making the guy look like embarrass the guy in front of everybody else? It doesn't make you a leader that people want to follow. And I'm not saying he's led before and he's led well. But as he got older, I think I think when he got into his 60s, he got more, power hungry, I guess. I could put it that way, but he wouldn't hold back on cussing somebody else. That was his go-to scheme to get things done.
Did you ever do guest commentary during the Zeb Colter run?
I did one time.
Yeah. Did you have Vince yelling?
No. Well, if he'd yelled at me, I would have. See, for him to yell at me out there, which would have thrown me off. The announcers were used to it. They were listening for it. I wasn't. And I wasn't hearing Vince. The headset I had on, I didn't even hear Vince say anything. Or if the headset I had on, if Vince had said, he must have not have said anything, or I wasn't keyed into Vince's conversation with the other two announcers. I didn't hear anything. I was talking to John and I was talking to Michael.
Do you know if, I don't know if JBL was doing commentary this time, I can't remember, but I know Jerry probably still was. But what did they say that Vince was yelling at them on the headsets? Do you remember?
I don't think he yelled at Lawler. He never did, for some reason. I don't think he yelled at JBL either. His go-to yeller, old
yeller,
the old yeller, I guess he saved that for Michael Cole, because Michael Cole, he's the pitch man. He's the one talking about Fox or whatever they had going on, and he would have to say something for an advertiser. That was reserved for him, basically. And he may have corrected some guys, I guess, like JBL and Lawler. But I asked Lawler one time, I said, does he fucking scream at you? And he said, no. Because he had I think he had a different relationship with Vince than everybody else. See, everybody else would have to get to TV at like 4 o'clock, 5 o'clock. At 2 o'clock. Lawler would walk in at 5 o'clock, 5:30, 6. And he told them one time, don't tell me what's going on the show because I want to see it like a fan sees it. Which was bullcrap because Lawler just didn't want to be there early. So by saying that, Vince said, oh, yeah, that's good. That's good, Jerry. That's good thinking. So Lawler could walk in at any time, which was great for him. And he'd say, somebody said, well, this is what's going on. They would only tell him something that he had to know. That like if he did an in-ring or if he had to interview somebody, they'd only tell him what he needed to know. The rest of it, Lawler was seeing it at the same time the fans at home were seeing it. So I asked him one of them, I said, how do you do that? He said, I don't know. He laughed. Lucky, I guess. Walked off.
He's been pulling that since the 90s, I think, or at least the early 2000s.
See, Lawler, you know how much thought Lawler used to put into booking Memphis TV? I swear to God, when he would get it, see, him and Jerry Jarrett used to switch the roles back and forth. Mm-hmm. Lawler never booked through the fall. You know why?
It's because it's NFL season.
Football season. He had to go follow the Cleveland Browns, and he'd always make those weekend trips to Cleveland to watch them play. And so Jerry Jarrett would take over, and Jerry Jarrett would book all through the winter. Come the spring, he'd take the spring and he'd take the summer. Now, the summer, traditionally, for old wrestling territories, was the best time of year. Kids were out of school. I mean, you don't have to worry about going to a show in the middle of the week. And he took that over. But actually, it worked because neither one of them suffered from burnout. And he would come back, and I guess when Lawler would come back in the spring, everything would change. Not everything. I mean, the talent would stay the same. He would just adjust what was going on there and take it through the summer, which was actually worked great for Memphis. Because Memphis to me was always a territory that was really ahead of its time. The first music videos were done in Memphis and outside the studio stuff. But that was Lawler just sitting back and all of a sudden going down the road and have an idea. And that's how much thought he would put into it. I have seen Lawler show up at Memphis TV at 10 o'clock. And I said, I asked him when he come in, I said, what am I doing today? He said, I don't know, I hadn't booked it yet. Then he would go back in the office, which was down the hallway. It's where Vince and the announcer would stay with Lance. And he would book the show. And then it went live. I don't care if you were ready or not. 11 o'clock, wrestling was live. And he would book it, and sometimes they'd book it in 15 minutes. An hour and a half show, they'd book it, and they'd run it. Crazy, huh?
Yeah, absolutely. Hey, sometimes the police would turn up to arrest Billy Joe Travis as well, but we've told that story. I do. But
oh, yeah.
I love that.
That was a good story. But, yeah, he would spend the minimum amount possible sometimes on booking wrestling. And we would go to these shows. It just got hot. And like from 81 to 84, that was a very, very hot territory. And put out great TV, had great ratings. And we've talked about this before. He would do ratings like primetime ratings. He would do ratings that really challenged Dallas, the big show back in the 80s. Dallas, I don't know what Dallas would do, but wrestling would do like 21, 22 rating. It's unbelievable. So they could do something like that now.
Well, they bite your arm off for it.
If we had the type of wrestling they have now on Memphis TV, it wouldn't have grown so much.
No,
because people look at it and I don't know.
We've got one more bit of news, then we'll get to the trouble with TNA. Brock Lesnar flatly turned down a program with Bray Wyatt that would have led to this year's WrestleMania, and he'd rather enter, apparently, a short-term feud with Omos instead. You were vocal when Bray Wyatt started coming back, and I asked you at the time, I was never a fan of Bray Wyatt, and I think when the White Rabbit promos and his initial return happened, you were actually fairly intrigued. You thought it was quite well done. But then where did it... It's sort of gone on for so long now, and I think the consensus is it's been months and months and months of this, and where was the fall-off?
Because nothing happened. Oh, Bray Wyatt's coming back. Yay, yay. And everybody was all excited. And then all of a sudden, it plateaued and bottom dropped out. There's nothing. If Bray Wyatt, if I'm sitting in New York City, right across from Madison Square Garden, and they put Bray Wyatt on the card, that would not make me go, certainly wouldn't make me buy a ticket, but it would actually kind of stop me from going. Because Bray Wyatt, I don't know what they think they're doing with it. And this is what I think. I think Bray is booking it himself. I think they have told Bray that you have such an internal feel for this character. Why don't you book it and then bring it to us? And I'm thinking, I don't get it. Uncle Howdy, I don't get it. I don't get it. I just don't get it, period. And I tell you what, when I saw that he was going to go and LA Knight was his first opponent, I'm going to have to tip my hat to LA Knight because it didn't kill him off. Actually, it kind of got him over because he's such a good talker. The question was that Brock Lesnar turned it down.
Brock Lesnar apparently turned down, because I don't know if it's because of the supernatural feel or maybe the Bray character's peaked already for a second time, or Brock's just... What do you think's going through Brock's head there?
No, Brock don't want to mess with it. What if he beats him? I mean, what if Brock beats Bray Wyatt? Am I going to be mad? No. Is it going to help Brock? No. And you know Bray's not beating him because that's not happening, period. Because they know Brock. You know, when Brock brings a problem in, it's not like, well, he'll come around to it. No, Brock won't come around to it. Brock's multi-millionaire. He'll just get up and walk out the door and keep going. So they just can't do anything they want to do with Brock because, you know, they have built their own, I don't know how to say it. They have built a monster in Brock because he don't need their money anymore. I mean, he's got money, lives up there in some big-ass farm in Canada, and nothing would suit him better than go up and do a big damn tractor out in the middle of a field, plowing it. But he's damn sure not going to go into some that he views as a lesser angle with Bray Wyatt. And I don't know how they would end that match anyway, or I don't even know who would be interested in it. They may think they can get some heat on Bray Wyatt by having him do something to Brock. But if Brock doesn't beat him at WrestleMania, he's not interested in it. Actually, I think Brock made the right move on this. If I was Brock and they said, oh, you're going to work with Bray Wyatt, I said, no, I don't think so. I'm not going to work with him because there's no upside to him. I don't think there's much upside to Bray, even if he beat Brock. I really don't. Now, maybe they can come up with something, but they hadn't really won the hearts and minds of wrestling fans around the world with Bray Wyatt because they were too slow getting into it. There was no substance to it. That Fireflies and Friends, what's they call that show? Fireflies and what?
Probably. You watch it more than I do.
Oh, well, I don't know.
Firefly Funhouse? Was it Funhouse or something?
Something. I never have gotten that into it. Even when I was there, I didn't think Bray Wyatt was that over, other than the they turn their phones on when he goes to the ring, which is impressive if you're looking at it. But they sent him home, which surprised everybody, but then brought him back. And I don't know what they're going to do with him. I think it's one of those deals that they could keep doing this angle or this character till the cows come home. Still, nobody's going to give a crap.
I think when Bray Wyatt was the Fiend a couple of years ago, or a few years ago before he was let go, was the knock on Bray Wyatt was that everyone who worked with him ended up getting less over because he just sort of just killed everybody, apart from maybe Randy Orton or something. But also
listen,
now
he was
go
on. No, he was a heel, but nobody was mad at him, and he didn't beat anybody with the help of the other two guys out there, the family. He just beat the guy. Where is the heat in that? Nothing. Now, maybe if he'd have beat him and then the guy come back and starts beating the hell out of Bray Wyatt, then the other two guys jump in, you may have had something, but as it was like missable, like you can miss it, not miss anything. Missable TV. I mean, I think when Bray Wyatt came on, even before he left, it was a kitchen break. Let me go in here and let me get something to drink, or let me get a Coke, or let me get a cup of coffee. Let me get something, because I'm not going to miss anything here as long as he's in the ring.
And I might blow your mind here. I actually did watch a tiny bit of SmackDown last Friday, and you saw it as well. I know you did. Uncle Howdy attacked Bobby Lashley from behind, and Bobby Lashley turned around and kicked his ass. I was like, well, that's the mystique of Uncle Howdy done.
Oh yeah. Well, actually, I missed it last week because I was ill a little bit. I actually missed my show on the network with Sportskeeda, and that's on every Friday night at 11:05. Everybody wants to tune in. But to have him attack Bobby Lashley, and then Bobby Lashley turned right around and beat the crap out of him, what was the purpose? See? See, I don't care what that's another one, Uncle Howdy, I don't give a crap about. It's a stupid name to begin with. Uncle Howdy. I don't get it. I mean, how many times can I say that? I don't get it. But it's not just me. I don't think wrestling fans are getting it. Because when you look at them, they're going, what are they doing here? What's this supposed to mean? Now, with the Sami Zayn and the bloodline, everybody understands that. You get it. See, they get it. I don't get it, especially when it comes to Uncle Howdy and Bray Wyatt. I don't know. We'll see.
Excuse me. I'm sorry for coughing all the way through this. Anyway, right, we are done with the news. We're going to talk some TNA for the time we've got. And we're going to go from the beginning. Now, for people who don't know, oh, dear me, eyes are rolling already. Flashbacks happening. PTSD. I'm sorry. We will... well, I'll ask you, when was the first time you heard about the concepts of Jeff and Jerry and I believe Bob Ryder coming up with this new wrestling promotion? When was the first time you heard of it? Was it Jeff trying to pitch it to you?
I was bringing Jeff into Puerto Rico because he wanted to make some shots down there. So I'd bring him in because he had a name off the WCW and the WWE television. All right. When did they go to WWE?
2002, so it would have been F.
Oh, yeah. Okay. People kind of knew him, and I would bring him in, and he was, Jeff's a heat magnet anyway. He can walk to the ring and just look at you. You feel like slapping the living crap out of him. And he don't got to say a word. And he was telling me about they were going to try to start up a new organization and wanted to know would I be interested. Of course, at the time, I was happy in Puerto Rico. I worked 3 days a week. I had 4 days or 3 days to go to the beach, drink Bacardi rum or Malibu rum. So I had a great setup down there. And and he wanted to know would I be interested, and I went, maybe. But I was living in Tennessee at the time. So finally he called me. He said, "Hey, I'd like to bring you in on this first show as an agent." I said, "Okay." And we set the money. It wasn't that much, but it's okay. But I got to go back to Tennessee, see my family. So I went back up there, and they did that. We actually did 2 shows that night, and then I didn't hear from them for a while because I knew they did another TV. And finally, Jeff called me. He said, "Well, we're not going to bring you in anymore." I said, "Was I that bad?" He said, "No, I don't have nothing to do with that." He says, and what they had heard was what their pay-per-view guy told them, and I don't know why he told them this, they did 80,000 buys, which they were just elated with 80,000 buys. I don't know where he got that number, but I think it was something like 10,000 buys. I don't know how it got messed up. And I think they had gone and bought a bunch of camera equipment, and they bought a lot of stuff. So now they said they're going to have to pull back and readjust. And they almost went out of business, I think, after the first 2 or 3 pay-per-views. And that's when Dixie Carter came into the picture. Mm-hmm. And I think she actually brought up that her daddy, old man Carter, had a lot of money, and he did. And he might be interested in backing or becoming an investor in the company. And Jeff and Jerry Jarrett got on a plane one day going to Dallas and came back with a new investor. And the Carters invested into the company. Now, Dixie, up to this point, was running a publicity firm, an advertising firm.
Yeah, PR.
That's what she was doing. But now she's a partner, and she was her father's representative on site in Nashville, and it went from there. Now, Dixie, up to this point, didn't know a wrist hole from a wristwatch. She didn't know anything. She just knew how to publicize something, but was like straight advertising, not in the genre that her family got into. Pro wrestling is totally different, and you deal with a completely different fan base. So she was out of her element, and things went from there, and sometimes they weren't good.
I will take it back a bit to the first ever episode. Now, I sent you a match listing of the first ever episode, and I printed it out, and helpfully, it's printed out in pink instead of blue. So I'm really going to squint on this one. So tell me if you have any comments on any of these guys. The Flying Elvises defeat AJ Styles, Jerry Lynn, Low Key. T.O. defeated Hollywood. I believe that was the midget match. The Johnsons, Richard and Rod Johnson, defeated Psychosis and James Storm. Do you remember the Johnsons? These were the 2 guys who dressed up like a pair of cocks, basically.
No, I don't remember. I remember the name, but see, we had so many matches on that first night. We was doing two tapes, mm-hmm. And I don't remember I think they were 2 brothers. I do remember that. Twins.
Yeah.
I think. And they have another name, but I remember them. I don't know them going as the Johnsons, but I do remember it since you brought it up. This has been, I don't know, 20 years ago, 21 years ago.
I'll give you a few more. Christian York and Joey Matthews, my boy Joey Mercury versus the Dupps. Ken Shamrock and Malice defeat Brian Christopher and a load of other people, and then Ken Shamrock defeats Malice with James Mitchell to win the vacant NWA Heavyweight Championship. What was Ken Shamrock like to deal with at this time?
He was okay. I didn't handle his match, and I think the reason he was there was because he had a name from MMA, and I think WWE Elf had already used him, so he had somewhat of a name. But that first night was, when you do a bunch of matches in the night, sometimes they all run together. You have different agents. Sometimes you have to be careful you don't use the same finish, because I may have 2 matches or 3 matches, and then the other agent, and we could have the same finish. That's what we got to check with each other in the back.
I'll ask this very quickly as well. You finally make the move to TNA as a booker around September 2003, some 15 months after the company's first show. Dave Meltzer, your old friend, wrote at the time that TNA offered you twice the money that Victor Quiñones was paying you, plus the IWA was experiencing a downturn in business. Is that true?
Well, they didn't offer me, what did you say, TNA offered me twice the money?
Yes.
They didn't. They offered me a raise. It wasn't twice the money. And IWA was not experiencing a downturn in business. It was still, blasting. It actually, after I left, it took 3 months or 2 months for it to go down, because it ran on its own power for 2 months. All they had to do was continue to book what I had booked, and it continued to do well. Then when I left, 2 months gone, then you could see the chinks in the armor. It was falling off. And then they went into a downturn. Now, it went into a downturn and Victor Quiñones, I don't know if a lot of people know who he is. He was a guy who was he was Puerto Rican, and he grew up, I think, in New York and Puerto Rico, both of them. But he was a friend of Gorilla Monsoon, and Gorilla liked him. He used to do a lot of traveling with him. And Victor Quiñones, I don't know where all his money came from, but I think he got involved in Japanese wrestling. And I think he made a lot of money in the Japanese merchandise market, because he was constantly bringing in T-shirts and pictures and stuff. And there's a lot of money in those gimmicks, a lot of money. And I think I left, it said in 2003, it says, which is right. And 2005, I think Victor Quiñones killed himself, because he was making, when I took over, he was losing $10,000 a week is what he was losing. And after I took it over, after about 3 months, it took me about 3 months to get it into shape. Then he started making 10 or 20,000 a week, because we would go in those big stadiums and they would be 15,000, 16,000, and it'd be sold out. It'd be $120,000, $130,000 house. I don't think you could give 15,000 tickets away in Puerto Rico now and have people show up. The TV got hot. And I took the same thing I had learned under working in the States, working under, Jerry Jarrett, learning booking from those guys. And I took it down there, took my time with it, and got it up. And I took the same talent that they were kind of dying with, and I didn't bring anybody in, and I didn't send anybody out, because nobody wanted to come in. One thing. And I guess everybody really wanted to go out, but there was no place for them to go, so they stayed. But I took the same talent that they were dying with before, after about 3 months, and started putting up numbers. When I took it over, the ratings was a 2.6 for IWA Puerto Rico. I took my time with it, and I shot a lot of videos out of the studio, and it was just, they have 3 sports in Puerto Rico: baseball, cockfighting, and pro wrestling. Those are the sports in Puerto Rico. So, because it was always a hot territory. I went down there about, 20 years before I took over the book for IWA. It was hot, double hot. I mean, those stadiums were full. But I took my time with it, got it up, and they actually rivaled the old Memphis ratings. They were doing primetime numbers on Saturday afternoon at 1:00. Now, you have to be in Puerto Rico to know that Saturday afternoon in Puerto Rico is the shopping time. Because if you're going to get anything, the stores closed on Sunday. All the liquor stores sold on Sunday blue loss. So if you're going to get anything done, you have to get it done Saturday. So with the show being on at 1:00 and it doing such a great number, they were watching the show. And everybody knew us. And but when he started, Victor Quinones, back to him, when he started losing money, he was a kind of an emotional guy anyway. And I got up one morning, somebody called me, and they said, Victor Quinones killed himself last night. I don't know if he shot himself. I don't know what happened to him, but he died.
Did Victor try and keep you in the IWA after TNA gave you a better offer? Did you consider staying, or were you sort of burnt out with Puerto Rico this time?
I went in there and told him, I said, listen, Jeff has offered me a better offer to go with this new group. And I explained it to them, and they sit there, and they were like 3 partners. It was Savio, Miguel, and Quinones, Victor. And they had known each other for years and years and years. And Victor used to get them booked in Japan. And they sit there and looked at me. And I said, now, if you want to make me a better offer, I'll be open to that. You know what they did? Well, it wasn't up to Victor and Savio. It was Victor's money. He just looked at me. And I said, okay. And I got up and I left. So, but then about, 3 months later, 4 months later, now he was regretting his decision. He should have kept me, but then it's not too late, but he never tried to rectify it. Who knew what Victor Quinones was thinking, because he was a little bit off at times.
I've got to mention this as well. What the heck do I have to mention? I've just forgotten about it. Consultant. Were you a consultant for the IWA after you left? Because I've got this down here.
Well, I was, but I wasn't. They wanted me to consult on a part-time basis. But then again, I'd made the guy a couple $1 million, and he was all of a sudden, he tightened up his belt. And instead of asking for ideas of what I could help him with, he just kind of stopped talking to me. I said, okay. And I went on. I was happy with going on anyway, because I'd been down there for about 3 years. And after a while in Puerto Rico, you develop what they call island fever. And you just want to get back to the States. And so I come back, and I love Puerto Rico, love the people, love the food. And I liked it when they weren't trying to kill me, because when I'd actually wrestled down there before, there were a lot of wrestler fan, interchanges between me and them. So
I've got to ask you this as well. On his Wikipedia, and I believe this is not true, Quinones was the son of professional wrestler Robert Gorilla Monsoon Morella. I always thought that was a myth.
He is the son?
Wikipedia's claiming that, and how Wikipedia's never wrong. But, what did you hear at the time?
No, well, I heard the same thing. None of my business. I don't care. But his mother, I've seen pictures of his mother. Beautiful woman. Beautiful. But that does explain why Gorilla Monsoon and Victor were close. That does explain that's how he started working in the old WWF years ago. That does explain that. So I was wondering, what was his in with these people? Because he was just a Puerto Rican kid off the street, and Gorilla was Italian. So what is the connection there? And I'd always heard that. It was never verified, but you say it's verified now on Wikipedia?
No, it's on Wikipedia. That means nothing.
So, well, but the fact that they put that up probably means there's a little bit of truth to that fact.
We will move on. And the first big TNA signing under your booking tenure with TNA, so you came in September, and this should have happened very much around the same time. It should have been Hulk Hogan. Now, we've already talked about this in a previous podcast. Hulk Hogan doesn't turn up, but Jimmy Hart goes on TV on these TNA pay-per-views and says that Hogan has signed, even though he hasn't, and Hogan wouldn't turn up for many years. Instead, Hart then starts bringing in other WCW legendary names like Jim Duggan, who was last seen in WCW, Rick Steiner, and then Sting makes his return to the company. And then, to combat Sting, Jeff Jarrett brings in Lex Luger. Very controversial at the time, considering only a few months earlier his live-in girlfriend, Miss Elizabeth, had died. And that was the whole drug overdose thing. Luger was in the house with her, and basically they both got themselves into a pit of addiction. I know you weren't a fan of Luger in WCW or the WWF, but what was it like specifically dealing with Luger in TNA as far as you remember?
I had very little communication with him. I don't much like Lex because he's never really been friendly to me. And so when he wanted to be, or it would have been a good thing for me to be friendly with him. But see, Lex didn't understand the business. He never has. So when you go with him with an idea, he immediately tries to adjust the idea to fit his vision of it. Well, the guy couldn't draw you a stick figure. He couldn't draw you a tub of water, basically. If you put Lex Luger out there, he's got a great body, but unless you put him in a hell of a storyline, and I have yet to think of a storyline of Lex that he was actually over in, because I've said this before, Lex and Luger, and I've said this before, Luger drew a lot of money with Flair, but that was Flair. Sting drew a lot of money with Flair, but that was Flair. Then those brains down in WCW said, wow, man, this is where you need experience in your booking committee. I bet they would draw a lot of money between themselves. Now, rule number 1 says you don't take 2 top baby faces and put them against each other, because the Sting fans, they don't want to see him lose. The Luger fans, I'm sure he had some, they don't want to see him lose. So no matter who wins, you're going to piss half your people off. And unless you just turn one of them stone-ass heel, which Sting is not going to do, Luger's not going to do, it's a wasted exercise. And it's just, it was stupid booking and a stupid duo of guys we tried to do it with. It didn't work. Wouldn't work today. Won't work in 20 years. Won't work in 50 years. But they never really knew that Flair was the catalyst for both of them getting over. So putting them together, what does that prove? Nothing.
With TNA as well, they really weren't helping themselves in the early days by bringing in so many ex-WCW guys, because I think they even brought in Buff Bagwell for a short time as well.
They did. Mm-hmm. And he did a deal one time, I forgot, where he just sat on the edge. He'd lost a match. And he sat on the edge of the ring like he was perplexed or he was stunned. And I forgot the reason he gave that he lost the match. And I would have to go back and research this. If it's somebody's idea, if he sits there and he says, "This is the reason I'm not the buff I was before," this, that, and the other, but it sucked. One of the best things I saw in TNA was when Jeff Jarrett got in a fight with the Tennessee Titans, half the football team. That was one of the best things I saw there, because the people, I mean, those football players, pretty big guys. They were half drunk because they'd been drinking all night, and Jeff went out there. Of course, they worked this up, but they came out of those seats like you'd lit a fire under them. And I thought Jeff was going to get the crap beat out of him. But it came out good. It actually got over in the arena, and it got over in the town, and it gave people something to talk about. So, but it was well done, but there was nowhere to go from there either. But a well done segment.
Speaking of booking a good segment or booking a segment, can you talk about the roles some of the guys that we don't hear about so often in the booking committee took? I'm going to name Jimmy Hart, Scott D'Amore, and of course, the person I really want to hear a good story about, Glenn Gilberti, a.k.a. Disco Inferno.
Jimmy wasn't really on creative. He just threw some ideas and he would leave. I don't blame him. But he wasn't that involved with it. Scott D'Amore was, but he was learning, and I'm sure he knows a lot more now than he did then. But Gilberti, I'll say one thing about him. He wasn't boring. He came in one day and we were frustrated. I was pissed off because the creative team, it was like, why would we do this? And well, I don't goddamn know why we would do it. I guess because we're in a business called professional wrestling, I guess. I don't know. And then Gilbert come in one day and somebody told him, well, we're thinking about this. He said, and Dutch wants to do this. And all of a sudden he said, well, that's stupid. Oh my God, he caught me wrong. I wanted to snatch him up, and I like Glenn, but he has such a delivery. You want to kill him. So I said, why don't you go and sit your ass back in there and you come up for something, blah, blah, blah. And I kind of cussed him out. And he said, well, I didn't mean to piss you off. I said, and then I walked out. I mean, Glenn was, he was too much, but he did, a lot of people said he wasn't over in WCW. No, he wasn't over to draw money, but he was entertaining. So when you put him out there, you don't know what he's going to do. And I kind of enjoyed his matches. I enjoyed being around him, and I still talk to him every now and then. As for matches with anything that he did outside that, I would go down there to work. So most of my time was spent with creative guys. As far as going to the bars at night and messing around, I didn't do that because I didn't drink. So, you go to the bars, those guys, you might not get into 3 o'clock in the morning. You got to get up at 8 and go back to being creative again. Hard to go from being drunk to being creative. That's a big adjustment. But I'll say one thing about Glenn, he wasn't boring, and I liked him. And he was funny.
Speaking of Glenn not being boring with his creative, you may know where I'm going with this straight away. Disco's pretty famous for coming out with some of the most outlandish creative ideas ever heard in a booking meeting, like building the evil architects, Mike Tenay becoming an alien. It's just like all aliens and stuff. Did he ever pitch, even as a joke, did he even just pitch some complete nonsense just to amuse people?
Well, I'm sure it was complete nonsense because, see, Glenn's another one along the lines of Luger and Sting. They didn't really understand the basic concept of wrestling. See, how would an alien get heat? And people, you kind of got to put some kind of belief in something. But the best the best explanation I ever had about wrestling was and I may have said this before too, and I'll say it again, biblical. It's good versus evil. That's what it is. And the fans that sit out there, they want to see the good guy win. And that's what I did in Puerto Rico. I keep going back there, but I would put my good guys over about 90% of the time. So I would give the people who actually bought tickets, I would give them a payoff for buying a ticket, because then they would leave happy. But in my main events, I would always have something else happen to that baby face before he got out of that building. So the people were happy at one point that he won, but then mad because he got the crap beat out of him. And that would give them something to come back and see. So I did it for 3 years, and they have yet to pop to the routine. So I guess it was still working when I left.
I think we've got time for a couple more questions before we shut down. One more thing is Ed Ferrara stories. What did he bring to TNA apart from his white boy dreadlocks?
Not much. He wasn't there long. He was only there about, and I may be wrong in this, after 20 years, I have a reason to not remember all this stuff. I think he was only there for a month, and he was Vince Russo's buddy, and he wanted Vince to come in. Vince wanted him to come in because then he would have an ally, because they viewed wrestling along the same, within the same lens. They thought of, and who knows what some people in creative think that wrestling is. I know that the only thing that we've seen close to what wrestling used to be was the bloodline and Roman Reigns and Sami Zayn, that long-term storyline that started 9 months ago. And when's the last time we saw an angle go 9 months? The last 20, very seldom, never. But we used to do that back in the days, and, you could still go back to it. Almost a year later, give it some time and then rekindle it, and you could go again, maybe for a second round. But wrestling today is nothing like it used to be. And Ed Ferrara, he was another Vince. And I like Vince and I like Ed both. I don't think they had anything groundbreaking that could help the company. The company, what was going to help that company is steady improvement. But to hotshot something here with an alien, let's say, oh my God, an alien, people look at it like, what the hell is that? If you confuse them, you do more damage than you do good. And the old saying in wrestling is when you go in there and when you leave it in better shape than when you found it. Of course, that's an old saying, and that's been abused like son of a bitch too. So,
do you remember the story? I can fill in the blanks if you don't. But Jim Cornette and Ed Ferrara, I believe there was some sort of incident between those two. Do you remember hearing about it?
Well, I guess the main reason is because that he hated Vince Russo with a passion, hated him. And Ed Ferrara coming in, I guess, inflamed him more, because now it looked like Russo was kind of upping his armament, I guess, putting some more allies in place. And Jimmy viewed these guys like the same way I did, as like they were latecomers to wrestling anyway. But Jimmy didn't like them because of personal reasons. I can accept them. I can get along with them, even though we had a different philosophy on the application of wrestling. I can get along with them. I can say, hey, and I can go eat with them, and, But when it comes to wrestling, I didn't agree with them. And Jimmy didn't agree with him, not only on wrestling, he didn't agree with them on a personal basis. He hated them. So I don't know what happened between him and Ferrara.
I'll tell you.
Tell me and see if I remember it.
Ed Ferrara went to WCW along with Vince Russo, and Ferrara on WCW TV immediately debuted a character called Oklahoma.
I got it.
Yeah.
I know it. Yeah. I remember it now. Oh, Jim Ross and Cornette used to be big buddies. Used to be. But now they come in making fun, and you tell me if this makes sense, making fun of an announcer who has throat cancer. Didn't he have throat cancer?
No, it's Bell's palsy.
So it's
like paralysis of half his face, essentially.
Right. So what is funny about that? Nothing. It's actually mean-spirited, uncalled for. What do you can't draw a dime off of it, tell you the truth. And that pissed Cornette off because he knew it came from Vince and what's the guy's name now? Ed Ferrara. Yep. And he went off. And I mean, I don't think I would have reacted in such a way, but it was in bad taste. It really was.
All right. We'll give you one more question, I think. God, I've got so many. To give you. I'll ask you this one. And if it's no good, then I'll ask one more.
Hey, my cigar is coming out late today.
Yeah, why is that?
I don't know. I just saw you with a pen in your mouth. I thought, well, I don't have my cigar. What the hell?
Look, I mean, just for you, I mean, the teeth marks in this thing have been chewing the thing out for pieces. I'll ask you this one, and if you haven't got an answer, I'll move on to one more. Any memories of working with Goldilocks, the backstage interviewer?
She has about enough sense. I mean, she's just a Looney Tunes. I don't know how she got there, who she knew. She wasn't even good at her interviewing job. And you talk to her and you're blurry now for some reason.
Hang on, one sec.
Yeah, she was just there. I don't know how she got the job, who she knew. I didn't hire any of these people because she didn't understand wrestling either. Didn't even understand. I guess she understood how an interview should go, but she was just there. And I guess Vince brought her in. And the first shows that I had gone to, they had dancers in cages, strippers. Mm-hmm. The TNA was supposed to mean something, I guess. It wasn't total nonstop action. I think they wanted it to say tits and ass. That's why the strippers were in the cages. And I'm thinking, that's another thing I didn't get. So they would run every Wednesday night in Nashville at the old Fairgrounds Arena, which they had kind of outfitted for TV. And it's an old building, and the sound was horrible, and it just didn't look good for a pay-per-view building or a backdrop.
Let me ask you this. You said, because I'd know nothing about Goldilocks. I remember watching the old pay-per-views and stuff like that, but why did you say she was a loony? Because I know that she used to talk back to the wrestlers when she was interviewing. Yeah, she was
No, nobody told her how to do it, I guess. I mean, I didn't know her. She was their hire, not mine. And brother, Looney Tunes.
Anything more specific, or shall I move on?
No. I don't know anything about her, basically. Yeah. Okay. Because I didn't spend time around her, even when we started going to Orlando. Oh, that was a great time when we would leave Nashville. Listen, we was like a minor league baseball team. They'd hire a big coach bus for us, like a Greyhound with just seats in it. But it was more like a touring van, you know, and they had like 6 bunks in it and some seats, and then TV. We would leave Nashville after the pay-per-view, and we used to do it down there on Thursdays, not Mondays. We would do it on Thursdays, and we would drive all night. We would leave Nashville, drive down through Chattanooga, through Atlanta, down through Macon, through not Jacksonville, but down across the Florida state line, keep driving. It's about 500 miles. We drive all night long and get to Orlando. And apparently we were supposed to sleep on the bus, but there was a lot of getting drunk on the bus going down there. But of course, our TV was already mapped out, so guys were just drinking. I couldn't drink that much, to tell you the truth. I wish I'd had some pills so I could knock myself out. And we drive all night, and then we do the pay-per-view. We'd do the TV, and then we'd get back on the bus and drive 500 miles back. That was fun.
How was catering?
Catering, it was just cheap catering. Cheap. Now, WWE, when I went there, they had great catering. Great. I mean, it was like if you had stars for catering, their catering would be 5 stars. You get shrimp and lobster and steak, and when you went to TNA catering, you got grits, eggs, maybe some sausage, maybe, and that was it. I mean, it wasn't that bad, but it was nothing like a WWE catering.
Nothing, not to steal a line from Jim Cornette, but you said when they cooked the chicken, he was pretty sure it was a rubber chicken they cooked.
Oh, yeah, it was. It wasn't very good catering, but it wasn't that bad. It was okay.
Just to finish up on this, I Googled Goldilocks, and the first thing that comes up is Goldilocks claiming that Abyss got her fired. Do you know anything about this?
I might, if I had some details. You have any?
No, I'd not. I was just hoping you'd know. Never mind. We're going to shut down the podcast on that bitter disappointment of a last question. But we've come up to our time now.
If Abyss got her fired, that was probably his greatest achievement in TNA.
I'll tell you what. I'll pause 1 second. If I can find it in 30 seconds, I'll bring it up.
Did you hear her voice?
I did, yes. I just heard her voice then. I can't be bothered listening to the whole clip because it'll take about 5 minutes. So anyway, we'll leave that and maybe we'll find it out for another day and bring that to light. But for now, thank you very much for watching. All the plugs, for books and this T-shirt here, the links are under this video and all the podcasts and blah, blah, blah. If you want one like this. And all that remains to say is thank you very much for watching. We'll catch you again next week. Cheers, Dutch.
We the people.